Welcome back to another new podcast. In today's video, we dive into the chilling realm of true crime, focusing on a subject matter that often remains in the shadows: female serial killers. Throughout history, these women have defied societal expectations, leaving a trail of terror and mystery. Join us as we uncover the gripping tales of 8 female serial killers, examining their motives, methods, and the haunting legacies they left behind. Number 8. Juana Barraza. Juana Barraza, one of Mexico's most infamous serial killers, began a crime spree that lasted from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. Born to an alcoholic mother, Justa Samprio, she would not experience an easy childhood. Her mother traded her to a man for 3 beers. This man would repeatedly rape Juana, even impregnating her with a son. This would go on to serve as the foundation for her depraved mind. She would eventually become known as La Matavietas, or the Old Lady Killer. Juana's sinister journey began by carefully selecting her victims from a vulnerable demographic: elderly women living alone. Exploiting their loneliness and fragility, she would gain their trust under the guise of being a government worker in social welfare. This calculated approach allowed her to enter their homes undetected. Once inside, Juana's true nature as a relentless predator emerged. She bludgeoned and strangled her victims with whatever she could find. After murdering these women, she would then go on to rob them. The gruesome scenes she left behind were drenched in horror, bearing witness to the ferocity of her crimes. Barraza's victims, all aged 60 or over, were no match for her physical prowess that she honed being a professional lucha libre wrestler named La Dama del Silencio, or the Silent Lady. Law enforcement agencies tirelessly pursued leads, hoping to bring an end to the reign of terror. Investigators were no closer to finding the killer because they believed only a man could commit such heinous crimes. Even as witnesses reported seeing a woman in a wig, police still believed this was the work of a man, going as far as arresting transvestite prostitutes in Mexico City. It wasn't until January 25, 2006 that a crucial breakthrough occurred. Juana was seen fleeing the home of her latest victim, 82-year-old Ana Maria de los Reyes Alfaro, whom she had just strangled with a stethoscope. The witness chased down Juana after discovering the body, and an arrest was made. Barraza was tried in the spring of 2008, where the disturbing details of her crimes would be put on full display. Prosecutors alleged she was responsible for as many as 40 deaths, even though she would only confess to the crime she was caught fleeing from. She told police her motive was the resentment she still felt for the treatment experienced from her mother. On March 31st, 2008, her reign of terror would officially end when she was found guilty of 16 murders. The court handed down a sentence of 759 years in prison, ensuring she would never again walk free. Number 7. Mary Ann Cotton. Mary Ann Cotton was a notorious English serial killer who terrorized communities in the mid-19th century with her heinous crimes. Born in October 1832, Cotton's murderous spree extended over a period of several years, leaving a trail of death and suspicion in her wake. Cotton's crimes began in the late 1850s when she married William Mowbray, with whom she had 5 children. Shockingly, all of her offspring died in infancy, allegedly from gastric fever. However, suspicions arose when Cotton's stepson, Charles Edward Cotton, also fell ill and died under similar circumstances in March 1865. Undeterred, Cotton moved on, marrying her second husband, George Ward, in August 1865. Tragically, their children suffered the same fate as her previous offspring, succumbing to what she claimed was gastric fever. Within a few years, her marriage to Ward was marked by a series of infant deaths, including their 3 children. Cotton's third marriage, to James Robinson, occurred in August 1866. Once again, her children faced a grim fate. Out of the 4 children born to the couple, only one survived. The rest died in rapid succession from mysterious ailments that resembled gastric fever. The alarming pattern of death surrounding Mary Ann Cotton began to raise suspicions among those close to her, including medical professionals. In 1872, after the suspicious death of her fourth husband, Frederick Cotton, a coroner's inquest was finally initiated. The bodies of several of her deceased children were exhumed, revealing traces of arsenic in their system. On March 20th, 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was arrested and charged with the murder of her stepson, Charles Edward Cotton. Subsequent investigations linked her to the deaths of her husbands and children. During her trial, evidence piled up against her, with testimonies from witnesses and experts highlighting the presence of arsenic in the victims' bodies. On March 24th, 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Number 6. Karla Homolka. Karla Homolka, a name synonymous with one of Canada's most notorious criminal cases, embarked on a dark path of destruction alongside her husband, Paul Bernardo. Between 1990 and 1992, the couple committed a series of crimes that shocked the nation and captured international attention. Born on May 4th, 1970 in Ontario, Canada, Homolka met Bernardo in 1987 and soon began a relationship that would spiral into a nightmare. Together, they embarked on a spree of sexual assaults and murders that targeted young women. Their first victim was Homolka's younger sister, Tammy Homolka. On December 24th, 1990, they drugged and sexually assaulted her, leading to her tragic death. Disturbingly, this incident was captured on videotape by the couple themselves. Over the next 2 years, Homolka and Bernardo continued their reign of terror. They abducted, raped, and murdered 2 more young women, Leslie Mahaffey, 14, in June 1991, and Kristen French, 15, in April 1992. The horrifying details of their crimes sent shockwaves throughout the country and sparked a massive manhunt. The couple's crimes eventually came to light when Homolka was admitted to the hospital after being violently beaten with a flashlight by her husband, Bernardo. A month later, his DNA was matched to a series of sexual assaults that occurred in Scarborough, a suburb of Toronto, covering a span of 5 years beginning in 1987. Bernardo was a suspect and DNA samples were collected, but he was eventually ruled out. It all ended February 17th when Paul Bernardo was finally arrested for the Scarborough assaults and the murders of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. Initially uncooperative, Karla Homolka consulted with her lawyers, who advised her to seek a plea deal. In exchange for her cooperation, she struck a controversial deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to manslaughter instead of murder. This deal sparked outrage and controversy, as many believe Homolka's involvement in the crimes warranted a more severe punishment. On July 5th, 1993, Karla Homolka was sentenced to a mere 12 years in prison for her role in the deaths of her sister and the 2 young girls. Her plea deal and comparatively short sentence drew widespread criticism from the public. Following her release in 2005, Homolka maintained a low profile, seeking to live a quiet and anonymous life. Despite attempts to evade media attention and public scrutiny, her crimes and the controversial circumstances surrounding her case continue to haunt the collective memory of Canadians. Number 5. Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness, a Norwegian-American serial killer, unleashed mayhem in the early 20th century. Her gruesome crimes, which involved murder and greed, made headlines and left a lasting mark on criminal history. Born November 11, 1859 in Norway, Gunness immigrated to the United States in the late 1880s. Over the next 2 decades, she built a farm in LaPorte, Indiana, where she would carry out her heinous deeds. From the late 1800s to 1908, Gunness lured numerous suitors to her property through personal ads, preying on their wealth and vulnerability. The exact number of her victims remains unknown, but it is estimated that Gunness murdered over 40 people, including her own children and husbands. She would poison her victims with strychnine or other lethal substances, rob them of their valuables, and dispose of their bodies on her farm. In April 1908, a fire engulfed Gunness's farm, leading to a shocking discovery. Amidst the debris, investigators unearthed the remains of several victims, including her adopted daughter. The gruesome scene exposed the horrors that had been occurring behind closed doors. News of Gunness's crimes spread rapidly, and a nationwide manhunt was launched to bring her to justice. However, Gunness herself remained elusive. It was believed that she had perished in the fire, but doubts persisted. Finally, on May 22, 1908, a woman claiming to be Belle Gunness was spotted in Los Angeles. The authorities apprehended her, and fingerprints confirmed her true identity. Gunness had faked her death and escaped to start a new life. Now, she would face the consequences of her monstrous actions. The trial of Belle Gunness began on November 16, 1908. Witnesses testified about her crimes and the horror that unfolded on her farm. Despite mounting evidence against her, Gunness maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings. However, justice prevailed, and on November 28, 1908, Belle Gunness was found guilty of murder. Before she could face her punishment, tragedy struck. Gunness died on December 28, 1908, in her jail cell, reportedly by poisoning herself with strychnine. Number 4. Rosemary West. Rosemary West, a notorious British serial killer, was involved in a series of horrifying crimes that shocked the world. Born November 29, 1953, West embarked on a dark path alongside her husband, Fred West, in what became known as the House of Horrors case. The crimes committed by Rosemary West came to light in 1994 when the remains of several young women were discovered at the couple's residence at 25 Cromwell Street. The victims, which included West's own stepdaughter, were subjected to sexual abuse, torture, and murder. The extent of the West crimes became apparent as investigators delved deeper into their sordid history. It was revealed that the couple had abducted, assaulted, and killed numerous young women, including hitchhikers and lodgers, over a period spanning several years. On February 25, 1994, Rosemary and Fred West were arrested. The ensuing investigation uncovered horrifying evidence, including human remains buried in the cellar and garden of their house. The level of depravity and cruelty exhibited by the Wests shocked the nation. The trial of Rosemary West began on October 3, 1995, and lasted several weeks. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including testimonies from surviving victims, the discovery of body parts, and accounts of the couple's sadistic practices. During the trial, Rosemary West maintained her innocence, claiming that she was unaware of her husband's actions. However, the overwhelming evidence against her painted a chilling picture of her active involvement in the crimes. On November 22, 1995, Rosemary West was found guilty of 10 counts of murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Fred West, who had taken his own life while in custody, was never brought to trial. Number 3. Myra Hindley. Myra Hindley is a woman who's etched in British criminal history after her involvement in a series of crimes alongside her partner, Ian Brady. Born July 23, 1942 in England, Hindley's name became synonymous with the Moors murders. Between July 1963 and October 1965, Hindley and Brady abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered 5 children whose bodies they buried on Saddleworth Moor near Manchester. The victims, aged between 10 and 17, included Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans. Hindley's roles in these crimes shocked the nation, as she was initially perceived as an ordinary young woman. The couple's actions were revealed when Hindley's brother-in-law, David Smith, witnessed Brady brutally assaulting and killing Edward Evans, October 1965. Smith contacted the police, leading to their arrest. On October 7th, Hindley and Brady were apprehended by the authorities. Over the following months, the police painstakingly uncovered evidence, including photographs, tape recordings, and Henley's own diary, which detailed the horrific acts committed by the couple. The trial of Myra Henley began on April 19, 1966. She faced charges of murder, while Brady was charged with the murder of Edward Evans. The prosecution presented a case built on compelling evidence, including eyewitness testimonies from David Smith and the recovered incriminating materials. During the trial, Henley attempted to distance herself from the murders, claiming she had been coerced by Brady. However, her active participation and collaboration did not go unnoticed by the jury. On May 6, 1966, Henley was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Ian Brady received a similar sentence. Number 2. Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian countess born August 7, 1560, is infamous for her alleged heinous crimes and is often referred to as the Blood Countess. The accusations against Bathory revolve around her sadistic acts of torture, murder, and vampirism, which are said to have occurred in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. It is believed that Bathory targeted young girls from the local peasant population, luring them to her castle under the pretense of offering employment or education. Once in her grasp, she subjected her victims to unspeakable acts of brutality, including severe beatings, mutilation, and even acts of cannibalism. The exact number of Bathory's victims is unclear, with estimates ranging from dozens to hundreds. Her crimes, fueled by a sadistic desire for power and youth, were shrouded in secrecy until rumors began circulating and eventually witnesses came forward. On December 30th, 1610, authorities arrested Bathory and her accomplices, including servants, accused of aiding in her atrocities. The trial commenced in January 1611, and testimonies from witnesses painted a horrifying picture of Bathory's actions. Due to her noble status, Bathory was not sentenced to death, as was customary for crimes of such magnitude. Instead, she was placed under house arrest in her castle, bricked into a set of rooms where she spent the remainder of her life until her death, August 21st, 1614. Number 1. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos was an American serial killer who left a chilling legacy in the late 1980s. Born February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan, Wuornos' troubled life took a dark turn as she embarked on a killing spree that targeted men she claimed assaulted or threatened her. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos murdered several men while working as a prostitute in Florida. She would lure her victims to isolated locations and shoot them at close range. Wuornos' crimes became a media sensation, earning her the moniker of the Highway Killer. On January 9, 1991, Wuornos was finally apprehended by the authorities after a car she was driving, which belonged to one of her victims, was found abandoned. The investigation led to her arrest, and she quickly confessed to the murders, claiming self-defense. Wuornos' trial began January 14, 1992. The prosecution presented evidence of her calculated killings and portrayed her as a cold-blooded murderer. Wuornos' defense team argued that her actions were a result of a traumatic and abusive past which contributed to her mental state. Despite her defense's attempts to portray Wuornos as a victim, she was found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. The jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge upheld the sentence. Wuornos spent years on death row, appealing her sentence and maintaining her claims of self-defense. Her appeals, however, were unsuccessful. On October 9, 2002, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison, bringing an end to her saga. The case of Eileen Wuornos continues to generate debate and fascination, highlighting the complexities of criminal psychology and the consequences of a traumatic upbringing. Wuornos' actions in her subsequent trial serves as a stark reminder of the dark corners of the human mind and its propensity for violence. That concludes our list. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more content just like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you another time.